Hello and welcome once again to episode 83 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So today we have a special guest, Lynn.
Hi.
So we initially were talking about design, and Spencer was like, hey, Lynn has done a ton of design work in both of her apps, Hungry and Nafa. So what better guest to bring on to talk about design than someone who's done quite literally a lot more than just a little bit of UI design, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Lynn, I guess tell us a little bit about like how you go about the design process when you have something that you need designed for one of your apps. Like, what are the tools you use? What are the different steps in that process for you? How does it go from not even an idea yet to something that's on the screen that people can play with?
Well, normally whenever I have an idea, it's usually very rough, right? So, I would usually, following your advice, since Dimitri trained me and taught me everything, I usually use a lot of Apple's apps. So I would just browse through a lot of Apple's apps and just get inspiration. Like if I want, I don't know, to build out a table of some sort, right? Then I would use the Mail app because there's a lot of rows, there's a lot of tables. So I would just sort of mimic what other apps that are out there and just get inspiration. And then usually I do a lot of Googling to see what other people have done. And sorry, I'm pausing a lot. Yeah, I guess just Googling, copying, not really copying, but just sampling other products out there just to see if that can inspire me into something that I kind of want, and then just go from there. I usually use Sketch. I use Sketch for everything because I've only managed to learn Sketch. I feel like a lot of these design tools are pretty complicated. So yeah, I use Sketch. Pretty much just sketch out a lot of the stuff, and then after that, I have Dimitri to bounce ideas off of. Usually, he doesn't like to give me the answer right away, so often I have to spend time on it. And then afterwards, I would show him my design and such, and he's like, I prefer you not doing this, or this is actually the right way of doing it. So it's kind of nice to have someone there who you can always turn to whenever you need help. Yeah.
So I do want to chime in a little bit there. It's not that I'm hiding the answer from you. It's that I quite literally don't have an answer. So what you have that I lack in when it comes to design is that creative inspiration aspect of it. I am not able to necessarily come up with something really great from the get-go, or even to start with. And where my competencies with design lie are after the fact, when we already have something to polish it and to get it looking to a more polished level, and that's where I have a lot of good ability to iterate. But those initial steps of knowing where to start, that's where I am totally lost. So it's not that I'm hiding the answer from you; it's just I don't have anything yet.
Well, I thought it was interesting going back from when you both did the episode one or two episodes ago where I wasn't there. Lynn, you mentioned that you'll start kind of thinking about an app in thinking about the UI first. And Dimitri mentioned, you can kind of think about the UI first, or think about the models, the underlying data. And my thought was, yeah, I definitely think about the underlying data and then kind of use that to inform what the UI should look like. So I think there's a huge, just not huge, but there's definitely a clear difference between the way that you'll approach design and I will. Like, I think mine is just super like functional. Let me show things on the screen, where yours is like, let me make it look good first, and then I can make the stuff that no one sees work too. So I think it's interesting that we all kind of approach that differently, but obviously looking at like Notfa and Hungry, the UI is awesome. I mean, like the Swift UI stuff in Notfa is super crazy, and I have no idea how that's all done. And yeah, I mean, to me, it's super impressive because I wish I was good at design. That's what I went to college for, was like graphic design and stuff. And then I was like, ooh, seeing my peers do all this stuff, I didn't think I could do it. And maybe if I, practiced, I could have. But for whatever reason, it's not something that like I I can't like dedicate my time to it. I get bored of it, I guess, quickly, which is weird. Like I can write an entire app, but make me design something for 2 hours and I'll lose my mind, if that makes sense. So there's definitely a difference there for sure.
I think for me, it's easy to start off with design because I don't have a strong background in the computer, like programming. And so, like, I've always done like arts on the side and things like that. So for me, that is such much easier to start off with. Like for when I need to build an app, I don't have all the features, all the technical stuff ready because I don't have any of that. Does that make sense? So then it's easier for me to just start with something that I already know, which is design. And then the hard part is the coding. It comes after, and that's when I drag Dimitri in and like help me with the most of it, you know? So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of both design and programming, for the matter of fact, is being shown a technique that you can then like iterate on and improve. Because, for instance, with Not Pho, you didn't really have a style in mind before you started it, right? You kind of did some research and took a look at a bunch of different stylized representations of food, and you're like, well, this is one that I like, and this is one that I can maybe pull off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started off wanting something that looked sort of like abstract because I'm not very good with drawing, like especially like realistic things. So I figured, oh, if I do make the art more abstract, then it's sort of up into your interpretation as to what that item is. So then on my part, it's less work. I kind of just need to, make it weird a little bit. And then it kind of fits in with the sort of the style. I guess weird is the wrong word, but abstract, right? So then after a while, I'm like, well, this is not really obvious what it kind of is, but it is abstract. So but then after a while, I'm like, I really like the way people are doing this sort of styling and such. And then I start like, in a way, I usually look at a lot of vector images online, and then I'm like, yeah, I kind of like this style, but I kind of like the abstract that I started off with too. So then I kind of did a blend of the two, and now it kind of works for what I have to do.
Yeah, I think that's cool that you can like take inspiration and, like you said, looking at UIs. Earlier you said like just looking at UIs to kind of not. I can't remember what you said, like steal them, but you said, but then you kind of corrected yourself and like take inspiration from that, right? And kind of, and that's the whole thing is with anything, it sounds like you're looking at stuff and being like, oh, that's something I could do, but then kind of tweaking it to be in your own sort of style, and you're not, you're just being inspired, I suppose, by it and not just straight up copying it or ripping it off or anything. So. And being able to do that, I mean, okay, like let's step back here. Being able to just copy something, the style of something is impressive, but then, making it your own and kind of having your own flair to it is like, that's super cool and even harder to do. And basically, I'm jealous because, again, I wish I could do this stuff. And like, that was my goal since high school, was to like go into like digital media, like photography, design and all that. And I just didn't work. So it's cool to hear someone that can do it and actually do it, I guess. I'm jealous.
It's funny that you say that because sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Oh, I said it's funny that you say that because, like, I mean, for those who don't know, like, Spencer was my instructor when I was in coding school, right? And so, like, for you to say you're jealous, it's kind of weird because for me, I wish I can do the harder part, which is the programming part, because, like, doing the whole art stuff, it's so easy that it's like, okay, like, why can't I figure out how to code this, you know?
Well, you've just been doing it less time than both of us have. That's all.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time thing.
Yeah, I
And,
do have Dimitri to constantly, like, trying to measure up to, and it's kind of hard. I mean, he's been doing this for, like, 10 plus years, and I'm, like, just 3 years in, and I'm like, why can't I be as good as you every day?
Yeah, I was, I think Dimitri started watching it too, but there's this anime, it's like this pharmacist anime, and the dad will ask the son, like, pharmacy questions at dinner. Does Dimitri do that to you? Does he be like, okay, what is this method on this protocol during dinner?
I wish he does, because at one point because, like, I still haven't managed to get through, like, an actual technical interview yet, and, like, I fumble a lot when it comes to that, so, like, I'm so scared to even, like, look for a job, right? So I'm constantly trying to tell Dimitri, like, hey, if you have, like, a few minutes, like, ask me technical questions, like, just throw it at me and see if I can do it, and we never managed to.
Meanwhile, I'm like, what's the difference between a struct and a value type? Which is a trick question because they're the same thing. So, well, going back a little bit, it's interesting what you're mentioning, Spencer, about how, like, we can take inspirations from stuff and improve on it. That reminds me of a great, I think it was a video series from, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago called Everything is a Remix, which talked about this through the lens of music, and how all music is basically the same music from a decade ago, which is the same music from a decade ago. And it's all constantly just using the same motifs and using the same chords and using the same, like, progressions to tell different stories every time. And most of the time you don't even notice until someone points it out to you. Hey, this basic 5 keys that they're, like, playing in this song, those are the same exact 5 keys from this other artist from, like, 20 years ago. And they didn't even invent that. That's the same 5 keys from the 1950s. So it's like over and over, we are constantly remixing things, and the same goes for UI. I mean, that's what comes down to something being a style, right? Is people copying someone else's style, but also improving on it along the way. So, for instance, Lin in Not Pho, the style didn't stay that abstract artwork for very long. In fact, you iterated on it very quickly, and you changed it up to something that was, one, more comfortable for yourself, but also looks a lot better as you improved your skills, right? So Sketch wasn't something that you just knew how to use from the beginning. You were kind of, like, thrown into it. I just told you, hey, this is a tool that people use to design apps, and you're like, cool, I guess this is my world now. And we're able to start learning from there. So I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about how it felt to improve and get better at using that tool to make better and better art along the way. Because, like, as you got better at using the tool, your art got better as well, right?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely good. Being able to just, because like you said, like, it was a brand new tool. It was the first sort of design software that I used too. So I had no idea how all the keys work, how to even do complex strokes and such. But now, and, like, I remember when I used to, like, learn how to draw on there. I still don't know how to draw by hand, right? By the way, like, with a pencil in my hand, I can't even draw a circle. But on Vector, I love it because it's, like, so easy. It's one click and you drag your mouse and it's done, right? So it saved me a tons of time to learn the right technique and the tools and the shortcuts too, the keyboard shortcuts to how to get to all the different, I guess, tools. But yeah, it's been nice. It's been the thing is, though, like, as I get more and more comfortable with Sketch, I started to do more and more complex drawing at the same time. Like, before, it was just sort of one image after another. Now it's sort of like I'm trying to incorporate in more animation, so then I have to do frame by frame drawing, and sometimes I would spend like weeks on it, you know. So there's pros and cons to being able to get better, but at the same time, now that you're better, you want to do more. And so then it just takes more time. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm done with this app. Like, can I just, stop developing it? But yeah, it's been 2 years and I've been doing Sketch every day for 2 years. So
that's a lot of practice. That's awesome. So are you, I guess, coming from like, well, I don't know how to say this. Like, basically, every time that I've seen people use Sketch, it's been mostly in the, like, I guess, prototyping, right? Where, like, they're designing individual buttons and stuff, maybe, but they're also designing kind of, like, entire screens of an app. So those, like, individual ingredients that you're, like, animating around in Not FUD, those are all done in Sketch then? Mm-hmm. That's super cool. I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't even think about kind of doing more, I guess, traditional design in Sketch. I mean, it's just a vector app like Illustrator, so that's super cool, though.
Yeah, you should see the spreads that she has for, like, one recipe, because there's literally an artboard for every image or illustration that shows up in the recipe, but that's not just one artboard. That's 7 artboards that are all layered on top of each other in the app, because they do that like parallax collapsing effect as you scroll up, or they might be keyframe animations where like something is changing, water's boiling, an egg is cracking, and yeah, those are like all aspects that I could on a technical level like describe. Like I can make an animation of something changing frame by frame, or like changing and opening an angle or something, but I wouldn't necessarily have the creative competency to do something amorphic that is like not a rigid body simulation. So if you take the artist versus physicist approach, I'm very much on the physicist side. Like I will just simulate something, but not really come up with anything creative in the process. So there's a lot of kudos to you, Lynn, for actually coming up with the inspiration, but also pulling it off and doing it so well.
Yeah, for real. The animations in Not Fire are amazing. I mean, I remember, I think it was probably around the time that you launched it, and it was like a fried rice something, and it was just like, all of the different components were like taking up the entire screen, and they all kind of went into the pan and everything. I was like, just absolutely mind blown. It was super cool, and I'm not, just saying that. I think I hadn't ever seen anything like that up to that point. And also, I think you did it with Swift UI when Swift UI was pretty new, right?
Yeah.
That's super cool.
I can't take all the credit. I mean, it was Dimitri's idea to do the whole collapsing of the dishes, but the rest was me.
Well, I started off. I started that out with the typical example of a banh mi. So that's just a sandwich, and what better way to show a sandwich than in layers, right? So I was like, hey, you can have a sandwich when you scroll up, it just collapses the sandwich, and I can show you the code to do that. So I did that, and she did all the artwork for the sandwich, and then she was like, oh, let me do this for something else, and then something else, and then something else, and then managed to find all sorts of creative ways of using that same technique. And anytime she wanted to do something a little extra, she would like pull me in and say like, hey, I wanted to like move in a different angle, and to come up from a different direction. Can you help me with that? And I'm like, yeah, that's easy for me. But I would not have thought of necessarily doing that from the beginning. So
I don't know if this is for a project that like you can talk about or not. So I'll kind of be a little vague, but I saw this one design where there were a lot of individual components on the screen, and it was like you had perspective and everything. So how did you start with that? Like if I had to do something larger that was like, more than just an individual thing, like, a piece of meat, like in Not Pho, but it's like this entire kind of scene. I guess, are you starting out like by designing the individual components and then putting them in kind of this larger scene, or do you start with the scene and I guess, yeah, like what's your process? Like I basically my mind goes blank because I have no clue where I would even start with designing something super large like that, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, to give some context on this, Spencer, you totally can mention it. This was
Okay.
a scene of a supermarket for a project that I was working on, and I asked Lynn, "Hey, can you fill these shelves?" Like I set up some perspective shelves, and I was like, "Can you fill up these shelves with things?" And I was like, "I can do the shelves." Like once again, I can do the rigid mathematical process of like drawing perspective lines and making sure they're darn perfect, but actually putting things and making them look good inside of those shelves, that's like a little beyond my creative wisdom. So that's something that I asked Lynn to help with. So yeah, feel free to add to that.
I don't really have anything to add. It wasn't really my project, so I didn't have much.
Gotcha.
But I mean, like, I guess I can talk more about the design, like, because you were mentioning, like, how do I go about designing? Normally what I do is I don't start with individual elements. I don't really have individual elements in mind. I start off with like the overall what each green should look like. And then from there, I would tweak the individual elements to kind of fit in with what I'm trying to do.
So
yeah.
I guess it's like you go from like a broad, like maybe not very high fidelity, not high detail, but you like start drawing out like the boxes and where things should go, and then go in and add detail to them. Is that kind of what you mean?
Kind of.
Or
It's sort of a mix at this point because I know I used to start off with like drawing out on a notepad because that's what Dimitri said. Oh, draw it down and then you'll figure it out. But then I realized I don't know how things look on the paper. So then I just went to sketch and then I'm like, I want a button here. I want the screen to look like this overall. So what do I need in order to make that happen? And I know in Sketch they have those Apple UI templates that you can drag in like a nav bar or like a button. But usually they don't really work well with the style that I'm trying to do. So I never really use those. But I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. It kind of just all up in my brain. It kind of just works.
yeah, no, I totally get that.
I did remember bits and pieces of the question I did want to ask. So I would say the first kind of design, like creative design work that you started was probably with Hungry. And that was with its sticker pack, right? Up until then, it was just kind of putting together UIs and figuring out layout, and you weren't really flexing those creative muscles as much. And then when it came time to like make some stickers for Hungry, you got really inspired and you're like, I want to do a bunch of animated little fun stickers, right? And that kind of first stab at making little animated stickers is what led into your skill set that was able to really expand in Pho. So I want to throw Hungry a little bit under the bus here and ask, is it going to get updated stickers now that your style has improved so much over the year?
Probably not. The thing with me, I would like to update it if I feel like it's necessary. I don't think anyone's using that app. I mean, I don't even use it, even though I first created because I have that dilemma of like, what do I eat today, you know? But now I just turned to Dimitri's like, what do we eat today? So, I don't think I'll ever update it, maybe. I don't know. I do get bored after working on something for a little bit, so I'm kind of over it. So I don't think I'll go back to doing it.
Okay. Sorry, Hungry fans. Those stickers are going to stay in that era of Lynn's ability to draw for the foreseeable future.
They're very cringing to look at, too, like those initial stickers.
Well,
I think they're cute.
I think the thing with like that, like at this point you think that, right? And it's the same thing like with coding, but that just shows your own personal progress. That you know, at first, like when you release them, you probably thought that they were great, good enough to release, and now you're like, no, which is not a bad thing.
Please don't put my name on that.
No, it's just showing that, you've improved a ton to the point where, okay, your design eye is a lot better, and your ability is a lot better. So if you had to do them again today, you'd probably do them better in your opinion, right? So if anything, I think that shows the amount of progress that you've made since then. And obviously, like with Notfa, you've improved a ton, and the app is gorgeous. So,
and I learned how to cook a lot of stuff too.
Nice.
Yeah, just a side benefit of all that.
Yeah.
I got to learn how to eat a bunch of stuff. It was excellent. But you bring up an excellent point, Spencer, that like it's not just training your skills in terms of being able to produce the artwork. It's also training your eye to be able to tell like what is good and what is bad. And it's not necessarily an objective decision, but something that needs to be consistent, right? Being able to say like in this context, this is all consistent and therefore it's good. But in a different context, this might not fit in at all. And that's where we might see it as bad. So for instance, I don't think that the artwork in Hungary is bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a completely different style that would never fit in with something like Nafa, which has an extreme level of polish to it. But that doesn't make it bad at all. It still makes me happy every time I see them because they're just funny and silly.
Yeah.
So it's not that they needed to be changed in that regard at all. So that is something that I do want to stress for everyone that's listening. It's sometimes almost better to train your eye than it is to train your skills. Like as Lynn said, she is not even capable of like drawing with a pencil in hand. And that's okay. That's where a tool like Sketch is much better because it allows you to iterate and fudge and change what's on the screen without necessarily deleting everything with a giant eraser and then starting over. So you can go ahead and nudge it towards where your eye wants it to be. But you can only do that if your eye is trained, right? So I've heard this from a ton of designers, even those that work at companies like Apple, who we tend to think as one of the companies with some of the best design is, hey, all those people working on like the look and feel of the iPhone, they don't necessarily all know how to draw. And that's totally okay as long as they can get that final vision out of their head and onto something practical for others to see. That's where the skill set lies. But having that vision in your head and having a clear vision, I think, is more important than anything. Really.
Yeah, I think whatever tool you can use to kind of extract that from your mind, that's great. I mean, I think that's the hard thing for me is like, I feel, maybe this is just me, I don't know, naively thinking this, but like, I feel like I could, I don't know how to say this. This is weird. Like, I feel like I could, give it enough time, I could think of a good design for something, but kind of extracting that out into the real world is where like my mind goes from like A to D but misses B and C, and so it just like doesn't work, if that makes sense. So I think there's something huge to be said for just being able to get that out of your mind onto something sort of physical or tangible, and that's what makes me jealous is like I feel like I could come up with a good design, but I can never get it out the way that I want it to, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Well, that jealousy is 15 years of creative output, right? So where we hunkered down and learned the creativity behind the engineering aspect of programming, Lynn was doing that from the artistic point of view, and not necessarily for apps, right? Lynn, before this, what were some of the other things that you were doing artistically that like perhaps nurtured that muscle, that figurative muscle of being able to really have a good plan in terms of what something is in your head before you start executing on it?
Well, when I was young, I started off like I loved to sew. I do a lot of sewing. I do a
Mm.
lot of embroidery, um, and then just over the years, I do like paper art. Recent years, I learned how to do quilling, which is like you start off with a really thin, long strip of paper, and you kind of just roll it up into like a coil, pretty much. And then you doing that, like you can make so many shapes out of it. Like I learned how to do paper art that looks like paper mache, with just paper. I mean, I mean on my free time, usually when I lie in bed, like I would just go on Pinterest and like look at a bunch of art that people do, a bunch of sewing or embroidery that people do, and then I just imagine in my head like I can do that. And then I move on. So I do a lot of that. I do like I guess I kind of inspect other people's art out there and
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I don't know how to do that. Let me look it up. How do I do that? And I think over the years, like just doing that, I guess exercising my brain without like physically doing it, I think that kind of helps with the whole, art stuff and creative side of things.
It's like dreams, right? How dreams like replay the things that you've learned from that day and reinforce them over time.
Right.
Like I guess that becomes a skill that I never really thought of this until now, but that becomes a skill that you can go ahead and use just by looking at stuff. So in your case, like identifying what you can do means that you're identifying all the engineering aspects to pulling it off, right? Like there is that artistic creative side, but there's also like an engineering side to art, to embroidery, to quilling. Like all of this involves thinking and problem solving in a very different way than what we're used to, but you do need to figure it out, right? You need to put the pieces in order to make it into something that's going to work. So perhaps you determining, hey, like this is something that I can pull off really under like the underlying meaning to that is, hey, I know what the steps involved are, and there are no unknowns to being able to do this. So therefore, it's clear it's something I know how to do. And then as soon as your brain kind of like gets confused and is like, hey, like how did that happen? That's when that like engine starts up and you get put into overdrive to try to figure it out.
Mhm.
And that creativity kind of drives you to learn more about something and then want to try it out for yourself and then further improve on it from there and then see like, oh, if I do this myself, like, hey, there's some things I never even thought of that are coming up from that process, and then you therefore iterate and improve. Like I think this is a set of skills that goes far beyond just like art or app development. Like even cooking is like a great example of that. Over the past few days, Lynn has been trying to make macarons, and I have enjoyed this because I got to taste a lot of macarons. But Lynn has been very frustrated in that whole process because it's like never coming out just the way she wants. Like, I just want to set the record straight. These can be sold for like $5 a piece. They are definitely at the level and far better than many store-bought macarons that I've had. But they're not at that level of perfection that she is trying to achieve. And therefore, she's like iterating on it and getting frustrated and trying to like problem solve and do research and all of that. I think is the same skill set at the end in the end of the day, right? And it's something that once you get good at that skill set, you are able to improve all sorts of different aspects of what you want to be doing in terms of like creative endeavors, right?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Well, the macaron thing too, but yeah, I think we're all just kind of flexing our brains in a problem solving way, right? Whatever it is. I mean, um, like you mentioned with going to sleep, it's funny. I can't remember where I read this. I'd have to look into it more, but I heard this and I've kind of thought about it since then as like this thing of you could basically tell your brain or have some problem like you're saying, like how do I design this or whatever, and you can kind of let your brain work through it as you sleep and it will kind of do some of the mental problem solving while you're sleeping in theory, I guess. I don't know if that's true, but kind of makes sense. Like subconsciously it's working on it in the background.
Yeah, it absolutely is true. There are some like rigid studies that have been done where you have people fall asleep essentially playing Tetris, and you score them before and after that sleep, and they are significantly better afterwards. But it's because they were thinking about it just as they were falling asleep, and therefore their brain, which is essentially a neural engine that's like iterating on its model of how to play Tetris over that 7 hours of sleep, and reorganizing that to be more efficient, right? Your brain at the end of the day just wants to be as efficient as possible, so that way it can live to experience another day efficiently. So it being able to recategorize that and make things more seamless is like what it's striving to do, as like to the best of its ability, right?
Real quick, going back to the macaron thing, my cousin did the exact same thing where she wanted to like perfect the recipe, and I can't remember how long she took, but probably a few months or something. And so her husband, my cousin-in-law, I guess, got like, is in the same place as Dimitri, where he got, tons and tons of them. And I don't know if he ever got sick of them, but she eventually perfected them, is my point. So to the point where she was happy. So keep at it. I'm sure you'll get there as well. But it sounds like it's not an easy thing to do, for sure.
I kind of gave up already.
Yeah.
I was done over. And Dimitri was like, oh, take it easy. Like, you don't have to do it every day. You can do it once a week. And I'm like, yeah, for you to eat. Like, I'm not interested, I'm doing it right now because there's a purpose. But, like, I don't care afterwards.
That's fair.
Yeah. Something I did learn through that experience, like as a complete side note, is powdered sugar is a lot less sweet than regular sugar that you powder yourself. Like the first batch that Lynn made, we didn't have powdered sugar, so she put it in a coffee grinder, was it? Or a spice processor? Yeah. And she powdered it herself. And those macarons were way sweeter than the ones that she made later with same quantity of sugar and everything. But that's because powdered sugar has a bunch of starch in it, and therefore it's a ton less sweet than actual granulated sugar that you then powder, which I found interesting.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, final question I have. Lynn, what is it that you are working on next?
Right now I am working on a personal project, I guess. It's so Dimitri and I are trying to lose weight and be healthy and work out and stay fit, and in order to do that we kind of need a way to log how much we weigh every day and like our food intake, not down to like the calories amount, but just in general, what are we eating today? Are we eating something that has a lot of starch today, or are we eating mostly vegetable the next day? That kind of idea. Are we getting enough fruits? So so right now I just, in notes, I just have a table and I'm manually like typing it out every day. And I'm like, well, it kind of gets annoying because then I have to record for Dimitri as well. I wish I have an app that I can just input in my own personal information, but I don't want to just download anybody's app because I want specific things. So now I'm kind of working on doing that. And this is the one project that Dimitri is not going to help me in because it's supposed to be a training project for me to build up some technical skills, since I'm jealous that you guys have that and I don't. And so he's refusing to help me, but he is helping me in terms of like figuring, like architecting it into like figuring out like what sort of steps to do. Because like we said, I'm better at doing the design work, so I already have all the design out, and like within a couple hours I'm like, this is the design I want, this is what I want to do. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, okay, go build it. I'm like, but I don't know how to build a model, I don't know how to build, like how to connect all the screens together. So he's helping me translate those UIs into like how to go about design, like writing it in code in a way where it makes sense, because I was being bombarded by just going straight in, designing the full screen without realizing that like, oh, I can break each element up into sections and just putting in dummy data first before I go and build up my model and being able to input actual data. So that is something I lacked in, and Dimitri is kind of helping me with that. And I kind of did a little, I designed I'm calling it Figgy, kind of like Piggy, but Figgy. Because the F kind of sometimes, depending how you say it, it's like a P sound. So I'm playing off of that. So I put an image of it on Twitter. It's an image of a fig, but inside there's a pig in it. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah,
I haven't
that's
seen
what
that. I'll
I'm
have to look
working
at it.
on. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, this is not something that's going to be released or anything. So it's just something that she's working on for herself, which I think is good.
Yeah.
We tend to like be over inundated with the idea that like because this is also our job that we need to make money off everything we make, and therefore we lose that satisfying ability to not finish something, which is sometimes what we need more than anything, so that way we can start something else that's different to pump those creative juices to our bodies. So yeah, I think it's good that you are using this as a challenge to yourself to kind of train yourself into getting those aspects that you're missing, so that way you can be prepared to use them again for the next project, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's been challenging without you. It took me 3 days to figure out how to build a table from scratch, and I learned how to use what is it, Grid, the new Grid in Swift UI. So I guess that's good. I am learning new things without Dimitri, but it just takes 3 days rather than like a 10-minute with Dimitri sitting there.
Yeah, but there's probably something to be said for going through that entire problem-solving process at your own pace and making sure that you understand everything like before you move on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, when you were in school at Lambda, it's hard because we're going at a breakneck pace, and there's not always enough time to like completely internalize everything. So.
Yeah, I cried every day for when we first started. You can ask Dimitri every
I'm
night
sorry.
for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, Lambda was harsh on her.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not your fault, Spencer. Mostly Andrew. No, I'm just kidding.
I think Spencer wrote the lesson, no?
Okay, then absolutely your fault.
And, yeah, I mean, it was basically that first, you were in the first cohort, right?
I was.
It was basically me and Andrew taking turns staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning to write the next day's lesson.
Yeah.
So, yeah, half of them were my fault, for sure. Let's see. Oh, well, on the topic of, you know, side project, or this being kind of, you know, like a personal project, not a side project per se, but I mean, I have this back catalog of, I think, 12 or 13 projects now that, like you mentioned earlier, like I kind of got bored with. Like, I probably wrote them originally to do something or to learn something, and then I learned the thing and I never finished them. So I just have this like rotting backlog of things on GitHub in private repositories that I'll probably never finish, but like they serve their purpose, and so it's like I don't feel too bad about them, if that makes sense. So yeah. Okay, final question from me, and I feel like I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask anyway. If I want to get better at design, what are some good tips, or like what could I do to improve, to minimize the jealousy?
I guess I can ask you the same question in terms of like, how do I get better at coding?
Yeah, that was gonna be the response, was practice, probably, and just doing it.
Yeah. I guess just look at lots of other people's apps and just, you know, do it every day, and that's. But you need to be passionate about it, I guess. Kind of like Dimitri's always telling me, like, I don't know, do little tutorials, learn how to like figure out one thing, like, oh, I don't know, like figure out how graph works, figure out how to build a chart in just Swift UI. Like, just focus on one little thing and then get good at that. But the thing is, I'm never interested, you know? Like, you have to really be interested in doing it. So for me, art is what I'm interested in. You know, the whole programming, coding aspect of it is just something that I have to learn to make that art come to life in a way. So I feel like I'm never going to get good at the coding part because it's not really what I focus on every day. So, I don't have an answer so for funny. You. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's like, that's exactly like a 180 of the way that I feel. I feel like design is like this thing that I have to do, and I wish I was good at it. I'm just not, so it's a bummer.
So we should work together then.
Yes, teamwork.
So I wonder how much of that feeling actually comes from not necessarily being good at it, driving you feeling that you're uninterested in it. Does that make sense? Because as you get better at something, then it's a lot easier to be passionate and be interested in that field that you are working with. And that can like feedback loop into itself and essentially like make it easier and easier for you to get better and better at it. Because once you get that first foot in the door of like actually finding an interest in something and it not being so overwhelming that you can't like do it on your own, then I feel like it's a lot easier afterwards to iterate and improve, right?
Yeah, I think so. And honestly, when I was learning iOS development, like, you know, I've talked about, like, it was really my cousin that kind of got me into the boot camp that I went to and everything. Like, at the most, I was thinking, like, being an iOS developer, programming was going to be, like, a way to pay for college, and that's about it, and, like, do something else. But then it did turn into a passion, so... I guess I've not had like that win of design yet where I'm like, oh, okay, I can do this. This is like, again, getting that positive feedback loop, that like gratification. So maybe I just need to keep, I don't know. It's hard though. Like it's hard starting from zero and not having anything to go off of from like past experience. So I guess pushing through it and just having that perseverance is probably the thing that I need to do, which is hard. So.
Yeah.
Or just
and having people around you.
Yeah.
And having people around you that can help you grow, I think is a very important thing that a lot of us take for granted. Like once we are good at something, that it's also thanks to the people around us that made that happen, right? It's not something that we did in isolation. Like perhaps it definitely feels like it did in a lot of cases, but I can always, like when I really start to think about it, like find distinct points that have made it possible for me to like be good at the things I'm good at. And I think it's important to recognize that that especially when you're telling others like, hey, if you want to be good at X, Y, and Z, like you especially see this by rich people saying like, hey, business is so easy. You just have to do these 3 things I did. Sure. When it has nothing to do with those 3 things, it has everything to do with the competencies that they've built up until that point, or the people that they knew that can get them there. And it's something that I think applies to way more than just like business, but also anything that you are practicing. It's perhaps because people let you practice that, or because they pushed you in a certain direction early on, and therefore that's something that you discovered as a result of that, or they gave you the time to nurture that curiosity when instead of like putting it down and saying something else is more important. So it's really at the intersection of multiple competencies that we can really flourish our creative passions, right? And be ultimately successful at them. It's never just like one aspect. Like you can be an excellent programmer, but if you have no creative output up until that point, you're very limited, right? And you feel that limitation, and you maybe think of yourself as a less competent programmer because of that, when that has nothing to do with each other. But they do certainly build upon each other to make other things possible, like building a product rather than just writing software, right?
Mm-hmm.
This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by, drumroll please, Not Pho. Tired of eating the same old meals time and time again? Consider Vietnamese food. You might already know of pho, but there are a ton of other flavors specific to Vietnamese cuisine that are sadly not well known around the world. This includes everything from sandwiches like banh mi, rice plates like com tam, and even the deliciously savory crepes known as banh xeo. And that's where the app Not Pho comes in. It's a free-to-try app dedicated to teaching you more about the wonders behind Vietnamese cuisine, brought to life with colorful and interactive illustrations and animations by Linh. Learn how to make many classic Vietnamese flavors at home, but even if you don't cook, you'll know how to order like a pro the next time you visit your local Vietnamese restaurant. New since last week is version 1.2, which brought a brand new home screen to the app featuring a recipe of the week and a map of Vietnam, allowing you to start exploring recipes by region as well. Thanks again to Not Pho and Linh for sponsoring our show. Search for Not Pho, that's N-O-T space P-H-O, on the App Store today to give it a try completely for free. So, as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at Code Completion to know when new episodes get released, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Linh, who is at Linbunyol, that's Linhbouniol on Twitter, for joining us this week, and Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis, that's SpencerCurtis on Twitter, for hosting with me every week. My name once again is Dimitri, and you can find me at Dimitri Bunyol, that's DIMITRIBOUNIOL, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Let me get these timestamps before I forget them. I think it was 30. And then... Sorry, Spencer.
You're good.
Question marks.
No, you're good. General stuff is great.
Cool. Titles. I grabbed these three early on, and then I kind of forgot along the way. So pick one.
I just need to make it weird. I like that one.
And sold.
All right. That was easy. You strike a hard bargain.
I know. I hate how when you paste, it just does not match the style. Darn you attributed strings.
I know.
I think that's title case. Why is title case so weird?
I don't know. I let's see. Title capitalization tool. I just use capitalizemytitle.com.
Oh, I think I made a service at one point. Where are our services?
Yep, that's right. Oh, no. Sorry. The I in it is also...
Oh, it's a short word that... Yeah, that looks better. I don't know. I feel like we need a neural engine just for capitalizing.
Weird. It's all the articles that you don't capitalize. So like a, the, to, those words.
No. Okay. My bad.
Mr. Linguist.
Yeah, Mr. Linguist. Come on.
Yeah, I one thing I learned from linguistics is language is completely arbitrary, and any attempt to add rules to it has just like been a pitiful embarrassment on the part of teachers. So yeah.
Not to mention English is the worst.
Oh, English is absolutely the worst. It's an amalgamation of like every other language, and yeah, everything goes. You want to bring over grammar from a different language? Go for it. You want to bring in words from a different language? Go for it. You want to bring in new phonology from a different language and confuse the language even more? Go for it. Yeah. All those lies of, there are 5 vowels and sometimes 6 if you include Y. No, there's like 22 vowels in English, and this depends on region. It's like, English is a mess.
English is bad, yeah.
Yeah. And then midway through recording, this wonderful thing decided to show up.
She was meowing at the door.
Yeah. So I let her in, and then she jumped on my desk and then started making it go up and down. So
Oh.
that was what that was. So yes, joys.
Good. No broken Pro Display XDRs though.
No broken Pro Display XDRs, thankfully.
That's
I think that's like wide enough where their jaw cannot like exert enough force to just
true.
like tear a hole through it. So I think that's like what's saving the Pro Display XDRs and by extension the LG Ultrafines, who are made of plastic and have somehow survived this whole time. So
They could probably
yeah.
do it to the iMac though. That thing's pretty thin, right?
Hush you. They're listening.
Oh. No ideas, Kitan.
Well, the iMac has the border, no?
Yeah,
Oh,
so it
that's
might
true.
survive with just like a cracked glass, which will then be insufferable to
man.
remove because it's all
Yeah.
like adhered down with glue and suction cups.
Did they adhesive that one?
Yeah, I think they
Oh.
did. Yeah, it's only
That's,
the cinema displays; those are held in by magnets. Which, like, come on, Apple, that was genius. You just
Yeah.
had like a 1-inch bezel, but on the iMac that I'm talking to right now, with like that also has a 1-inch bezel. That could have been magnets. No need for adhesive there, but alas, that's all I got.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.